The scariest part about these stories isn't what happened, it's that no one else was awake to stop it. Tonight, you're going to hear three true horror stories. Stories where something went terribly wrong, while everyone else was asleep. At the time, I was living alone in a mid-sized apartment complex just outside the city limits. It wasn't a dangerous area, but the building was old. It had those long, narrow hallways with industrial carpeting that smelled like dust and heavy fire doors that echoed whenever someone left their apartment. I worked the opening shift at a warehouse, so I was usually in bed by midnight. I'm a creature of habit. I don't like surprises, and I definitely don't like feeling exposed. Every night I went through the same routine. I locked the front door. I checked the deadbolt. Then I checked it again. Finally, I would close my bedroom door completely until I heard the latch click. I didn't like sleeping with the door open. It wasn't because I was afraid of ghosts or anything supernatural. It was just a primal instinct. The hallway felt too exposed, like a dark tunnel looking right at me while I was vulnerable. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. I woke up at 4 a.m. for work, and I noticed my bedroom door was slightly ajar. Just a crack, maybe an inch. I stood there staring at it, rubbing sleep out of my eyes. I assumed I just hadn't pulled it shut all the way. I even laughed at myself, thinking I was losing my mind from sleep deprivation. People forget things. It happens. But the next night, the pattern established itself. I made a conscious effort to close the door. I heard the click. I tugged on the handle to make sure it was latched. But when I woke up, it was open. And not just a crack this time. It was open about 6 inches, enough to see into the blackness of the hallway. I checked the entire apartment. Front door, locked rigid. Windows, sealed paint shut. There were absolutely no signs of anyone inside. But the logical part of my brain couldn't reconcile what was happening. Physics doesn't just stop working. Doors don't unlatch themselves. So that night, I ran a test. I closed my bedroom door. Then I took a piece of stiff cardstock paper, folded it into a wedge, and jammed it between the door and the frame near the floor. It was light enough that if the door moved even a fraction of an inch, the paper would fall flat on the laminate floor. I went to sleep feeling foolish, like I was setting a trap for a draft. When I woke up, the paper was on the floor, and the door was open a full foot. That is when the denial stopped. Someone, or something, was opening my door, and they were doing it while I slept. The next night, I decided I wasn't going to sleep. I turned off the lights, got into bed, and laid there. I slowed my breathing down to a rhythmic, heavy pace. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't check my phone. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the outline of the doorframe. Hours passed. My limbs started to ache from staying so still. Then, just after 2 a.m., I heard it. A soft metallic click. The handle was turning. It was moving slowly, so carefully. It was the movement of someone trying desperately not to make a sound. The latch slipped free and the door crept open less than an inch. And then it stopped. Whoever was there didn't come in. They didn't leave. They just stood there in the pitch black of the hallway, listening. I stayed perfectly frozen. I was terrified that if I swallowed, they would hear the click in my throat. Minutes passed in silence. Then the door creaked another inch. Then another. The movement was strategic. Each time the door moved, there was a long pause, like a predator waiting to see if the prey would flinch. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought the mattress would vibrate. I couldn't take it anymore. My leg cramped and I shifted, just slightly, against the sheets. The sound of the fabric rustling was barely audible, but the door stopped moving instantly. Complete stillness. That is when the realization hit me and my stomach dropped through the floor. They weren't trying to enter the room to rob me. They were testing me. They were checking to see how asleep I was. The next morning, I called the police. They searched the apartment. No signs of forced entry. No missing items. No fingerprints on the handle. The officer looked at me with pity, suggesting maybe I was sleepwalking or stressed. But as he was leaving, He paused at the front door. "Sir," he said, "you said you always lock the deadbolt, right?" "Every night," I said. He pointed to the lock. The deadbolt was unlocked. It wasn't picked. It wasn't broken. It had been turned from the inside. I stayed one more night in that apartment because I had nowhere else to go. I didn't sleep. I sat in bed with the lights on, holding a baseball bat. The door didn't move an inch. Whoever it was, they knew I was awake. They only played the game when I was vulnerable. I moved out a day later. I still don't know who was opening my door, but I know one thing for sure. They stopped the moment I stopped pretending to sleep. I was working the graveyard shift at a convenience store on the edge of town. You know the type. Flickering fluorescent lights, the hum of the slushy machine, and absolutely zero customers. It wasn't a dangerous job, usually, just lonely. Between midnight and sunrise, I might see two people, usually truck drivers or insomniacs, buying cigarettes. I was totally alone. No security guard, no manager in the back office. Just me, the counter, and a massive wall of glass facing the empty, dark parking lot. It feels like being in a fishbowl. You can't see out into the dark, but everything in the dark can see you. The landline phone behind the register almost never rang. We only used it for supplier orders. So at 3 a.m., when that harsh mechanical ring cut through the silence, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I picked it up. "Hello? Convenience store." Silence. I waited. Then I heard breathing. But it wasn't creepy breathing. It was calm, slow, rhythmically steady. It wasn't the breathing of someone who was nervous. I asked if anyone was there. The breathing just stopped and the line went dead. I hung up and rolled my eyes. I told myself it was a prank. Kids get bored. People get drunk. Whatever. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. I snatched it up, already annoyed. "Look, we don't have time for..." Before I could finish, a voice cut me off. "You're alone tonight." I froze. My grip on the receiver tightened. The caller continued, his voice terrifyingly soft. No cameras behind the counter, no one in the back room. My heart started racing. I hadn't told anyone about the camera blind spots. That wasn't public knowledge. "Who is this?" I stammered. Click. The line went dead again. I immediately walked around the counter and checked the front glass doors. Locked. I peered out into the parking lot. It was empty. Just the yellow glow of the street lamps buzzing over the asphalt. But I couldn't shake the feeling. You know that prickling sensation on the back of your neck? I felt like I was being watched. The phone rang a third time. This time I didn't answer right away. I just stared at it, screaming on the counter. When I finally picked it up, I didn't say a word. The voice spoke immediately. "You just checked the front door." My stomach dropped like I was on a roller coaster. This wasn't a guess. This wasn't a prank call from miles away. "You checked the lock," he said, "and now you're backing away from the glass." That's when I realized the terrifying truth. He could see me. Right now. I slowly lifted my head and looked through the glass wall. The parking lot lights flickered, and that's when I saw him. A dark figure standing just beyond the reach of the light, right at the edge of the pavement where the darkness began. He was perfectly still, just a silhouette. The caller stayed on the line. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make demands. He just narrated. "You're standing very still now," he whispered. "You're pretending not to be scared, but your hand is shaking." I was trembling. I begged him to leave. "Please, just go. I'm calling the cops." He chuckled, a dry, soft sound. "I just wanted to see if you'd notice." "Notice what?" I whispered. He paused. The silence on the line was heavy. "How easy it is to watch you." I slammed the phone down and dialed 911 immediately. I grabbed a box cutter from the shelf and locked myself in the storage room until I saw the red and blue lights flashing outside. When the police searched the area, the man was gone. Vanished, but they found something that made me quit on the spot. There were footprints in the dirt right up against the glass. He hadn't been standing at the edge of the lot the whole time. He had been standing inches from the window, close enough to see the phone, close enough to watch me breathe. He only moved back when I started looking for him. I quit the next day, but a week later my manager told me something that keeps me up at night. He checked the phone records for that night. There was only one incoming call logged, the very first one. The second and third calls, the ones where he described what I was doing, they never showed up on the log. I didn't see a face that night. I didn't hear a voice, but something moved through my house like it had lived there longer than we had. This happened back when I was 17. My parents had left me home alone for the first time overnight to go to a wedding. We lived in a single-story ranch house at the very edge of a quiet neighborhood. It was the kind of place where the streets empty out early and sound carries for miles. Behind our backyard, there was a small creek and then just miles of woods. During the day, it was paradise. At night, it felt isolated. I remember being excited. I ordered pizza, watched horror movies way too loud, and eventually fell asleep on the living room couch with the lights still blazing. I woke up sometime after midnight. The TV was still playing an infomercial, casting this blue glow over the room. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard it. A soft sound from the kitchen. It wasn't a crash. It wasn't footsteps. It was the faint, distinctive click of a cabinet door closing. I sat up, freezing on the couch. I told myself it was the ice maker, or the house settling. But then the sound came again. Another cabinet. Open. Pause. Close. It was slow. Careful. It was the sound of someone who didn't want to be heard, but wasn't afraid of being there. I knew the sounds of that house. I knew which floorboards creaked in the hallway. I knew how the air conditioner rattled when it kicked on. This didn't sound like any of that. I muted the TV. The silence that followed was suffocating. That's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. The sounds weren't random. They were moving. They started in the kitchen, and they were drifting toward the hallway, toward the bedrooms. Whoever it was, they weren't stumbling around in the dark. They weren't bumping into furniture. They were navigating, like they already knew the layout, like they knew exactly where the hall started. I grabbed my phone and sprinted into the bathroom, locking the door as quietly as I could. I sat on the bath mat, barely breathing, clutching my phone. I didn't call the police immediately. I don't know why. Panic does weird things to your brain. I was afraid that if I spoke to the dispatcher, the person outside would hear me. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. Then I heard the sound that finally broke me. A drawer sliding open. It was in the kitchen again. It was the heavy drawer to the left of the sink, the one where we kept the sharp carving knives. I knew that sound because I'd heard it every day of my life. Metal sliding against wood. I covered my mouth with both hands to keep from screaming. After that, everything went silent. I stayed locked in that bathroom until the sun came up. I was curled in a ball, shivering. When my parents finally pulled into the driveway, I ran out and told them everything. They searched the house. There were no signs of forced entry. The windows were intact. The locks were undamaged. Nothing was stolen. The TV was still there. My laptop was on the couch, but the knife drawer was empty. Every single blade was gone. Later that day, my dad walked out to the backyard to check the perimeter. The back gate, which was usually sticky and hard to open, was standing wide open. And near the creek, partially hidden in the tall grass, they found the knives. They were lined up, perfectly parallel to each other. Clean, no fingerprints, like they'd been placed there deliberately as some kind of message. We never found out who it was. No neighbors saw anything. No reports came in. But after that night, my parents admitted something to me that made the whole thing worse. They told me that for weeks before that night, things in the house had been slightly out of place. Not missing, just moved. A chair shifted a few inches, a door left open that should have been shut. Small enough to ignore, small enough to think you're just forgetful. I don't think whoever was in our house that night was there to steal. I think they were practicing. I think they had been coming in for weeks, learning the layout, learning our schedule, waiting for the night I was finally alone. If you've ever felt like you weren't alone at night, you're probably right. Subscribe if you want more true horror stories, because night listens back.